And now it's the CHF Overtime Podcast. Jordan DeLuciano here as always. But before we get into recapping pool play, joining me now is the AAU chairman, Mark Purowitz. Mark, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So before we get into the pool plays and the results of today, as always, let's talk about AAU and now the switch in the affiliation, AAU National Championship and AAU College Hockey. And Mark, just a little bit higher on the mic.
That's a big question. So let me start off with we started the Collegiate Hockey Federation 4 years ago as an alternative to the non-NCAA world, which is pretty extensive. And in the last 2-3 years, we've taken over 120 organizations and created a whole new different environment. And as a result of the growing partnership with AAU, what we've realized over the course of a number of years is that there's a significant need in the market for a new version of varsity, a new level of varsity hockey. What most people don't recognize from an educational standpoint is that there's about 30,000 youth players that come out every year from midgets and high school and juniors looking for a place to play after college. And in the world of NCAA varsity hockey, there's only Division I and Division III. There's less than 140 schools between the two. So simple math tells you that there's less than 3% opportunity for all these male and female players to come out and play. Less than 1% get scholarship. So for the last 30 some odd years, there's been this notion of club hockey, and it'll run the gamut from amazingly high level of hockey all the way down to more of a recreational version. But unfortunately, the general narrative and the stigma out there is that it's recreational hockey, which is significantly not the case. You take a look at the majority of our southern schools, which are the traditional ACC, SEC schools. They're Division I in every other sport except hockey. So, and they treat hockey as if it was a Division I oriented sport because of budget, because of Title IX, inequality and things of that nature. They can't do that. So we've been working very hard with AAU over the last few years to create an environment of raising that awareness of how good college hockey is in the United States, and the fact that for those that are choosing not to play NCAA, right, they're being student athletes, and they're placing the emphasis on student going to school, but the opportunity then to play at a very high level of hockey, as we've seen here over the last few days, is pretty apparent. And with the announcement of the closer partnership with AAU a few weeks ago, we've been working with them on this idea of, well, let's create a new version of varsity in the United States, right? And we're not have no desire to whatsoever to pull NCAA teams over, but it's to raise the awareness for those that are not going NCAA that there's just another level of varsity. And it's created an amazing conversation. We've had so many people reaching out and saying it's been long overdue. There's a market for it. And so many of our teams have said thank you in that regard. And I think here, as you've seen with all of the branding, with all of the recognition, AAU has just got a phenomenally good brand. And for us to use that as a way of piggybacking on that brand recognition, they've been around. They're the oldest sports organization in the United States dating back to the mid-1850s. So you take all of that history and you add hockey onto it. And what most people don't recognize as well is that prior to the 1940s, they were the organizing body for hockey in the United States. They were the ones sending teams to the Olympics. And then, USA Hockey was born under a different name back in the 50s and 60s. But they've wanted to get back into it, and they're using us as an opportunity to do that. So it's a great thing. We're looking forward to it next year. We've put out as part of our announcement that we're considering adding a D1 division. We announced a brand new women's division, out of our Southern Conference last year, and we've had a great amount of inquiry from other conferences to create new women's divisions. So there's just a huge opportunity for us, but just in general, the players, the fans, the schools have seen the recognition that AAU brings, and it's just raising the awareness level to a whole new level.
Like you mentioned, the awareness of AAU, the sponsorship, you see them in front of us, you
Yeah.
see them behind us, Howie's, Ribeiro, BioSteel, and you mentioned the women's division as well. Andy Sutton, the man in charge of Ribeiro, he's working with the new women's division, getting them jerseys, getting them all set up for the upcoming seasons. And right in the beginning, you talked about how in NCAA hockey, what do you say, 140 schools, maybe less than that. And so guys after juniors, after high school, they might not have an outlet. So to give them this opportunity at the AAU National Championship and get treated like stars here and really take an experience where, oh, I'm not playing NCAA, but really now enhance their playing time, their longevity, and really make it feel like they're matter, they're worth more, and give them a great time here in Philly right now.
And we've had players come to us from the teams here who played NCAA, transferred out. We've had coaches that have coached in NCAA and have come to now AAU-oriented schools. We have, like Andy, other NHL, ex-NHL players here who have been part of playing NCAA D1. And they said the experience that we have created here is by far better than most of the other organizations. You know, knowing that the investment that we're making, it's all about creating experience for the kids, right? I think, you know, we all got together and we said, none of these players are going to go on to play beyond college here, you know, except in maybe other recreational organizations. So this is all they have, and this is the experience that we want them to be long lasting, right? I would love to have these teams get together in 20 years looking back on their experience here and saying what an absolutely phenomenal time that we're getting. We have had so many teams come in, players from teams into Tournament Central, and thank us for, they've never thought that they would realize this type of an experience not playing NCAA hockey. So that's really reassuring for us.
And yet you have the teams that usually like a pool play based tournament and a national tournament for hockey. I'm taking from my experience as well. You know, teams, they lose the first game, they kind of feel like we're out of it. You know, you lose the second game, you kind of feel like they're out of it. But watching the games this weekend, today and yesterday, you know, one, teams are still fighting hard no matter what the scenario is. And two, even if they go 0-2 and then they're maybe 0-3 or they don't have the weekend they want, the experience is really making everything worth it. You know what? We might not have had a good result on the ice, but it's still a great time and something we'll never forget and look back on.
Well, and it's a certain amount of pride. You're playing for your school, you're playing for your teammates, you're playing for your friends. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing about those of us that have grown up into the sport, right? It's the camaraderie. You learn how to create responsibility between you and your teammates. And that's what's happening. The other thing too is that many of these teams that might be going 1-1 or 0-2, there's a bunch of seniors on the team. And this is their last games. And the players are playing for the seniors. So, you know, it creates a bond. And as you said, nobody's mailing it in here by any stretch of the imagination. We've had a number of 0-2 teams play their hearts out, you know, like the last game. You know, we saw, right?
Yes.
That, you know, that went in overtime. You know, they're already out of the tournament, and you know they're playing for the love of the game. They're playing because it's the right thing to do. The lessons learned coming out of this are phenomenal, right? You know, you learn like, no, you play until the whistle blows, whether you're 0-2 or 2-0. Yeah. And you know, but at the end of the day, they're playing for their fellow teammates, and like I said, especially for the seniors. This is the last thing, and they all want to make it a great experience for them.
Last year's national championship to now, anything that you're really proud of and that you guys improved on as a company, as leadership here at AAU?
Well, one of the things that we are consistently striving for, given that our mantra is players first, is reaching out to all the different players and coaches and schools and what more can we do? And we said this in the coaches meeting when we first started. We say it in the debriefs that we do. And as we're walking around talking to all the players and the fans, what more could we be offering? And there's a lot of the expanded experience here comes directly from that. You know, the sponsorships that we're able to do were a direct result of a series of asks, you know, from different players about, hey, it'd be great if we could do this. So, you know, the expanded media coverage that we have here, we doubled within our media broadcast. We doubled the number of people with the play-by-play. We've doubled the amount of camera crew and things of that nature, right? You know, we've actually probably tripled all the support staff, you know, the volunteers and things like that, which is, you know, I know very helpful to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
But, you walking around here, the other thing that we did was we added a second division, right? When we started the CHF, we had one division because we saw a great level of equality of play. And as more schools came on and we started to see, that there's a various levels of talent that's out there, we wanted to create a Division II and a Division III. And for this year, we added the Division III. So a normal 32 team tournament went to 40 teams. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday for Division II is 16 games a day. You add Saturday, Sunday, Monday, another 8 teams. You're playing 20 games a day. That is an awful lot of hockey in an environment, like an ice line that's got 4 pads, right? Which is really conducive for doing that. And we have a great relationship with John Graves here at Iceline. The agreement that we have is we have the entire facility for 5 days, so it gives us a tremendous amount of freedom to work the games. If games go long, we have a lot of flexibility in that regard. We're the only ones in the building. We've got no one walking around, all the media like we used to have in the past,
Yep.
right? That are getting in the way. So, these are just little improvements, little enhancements that we've made. The teams are making great use of the restaurant and the pub, doing all the team meals, things of that nature. I wish the weather was a little bit better. I'd love to add a whole outdoor experience for them.
Yeah, Pennsylvania in the middle of March. I know it's not. You got to hope for the best in that situation.
Right. But if we do decide to go forward with Division I next year, I would venture to guess that it'll be down south. Our contract with Iceline runs one more year, and they've been great partners, and we'll be back here next year in some way, shape, or form. But we absolutely want to do this in other locations. I mean, the South has 13 teams represented.
Yes.
Between Division II and Division III here, they put on a great show in all their different facilities. So, they want to host it down there multiple times. So I think we'll give each conference an opportunity, not only with the national championship, but with various showcases that we also want to put on. And, it's probably something we can talk about, in the broadcast as well.
So you mentioned the South. Let's get into the South and what's happening tomorrow, Mark. So we have our matchups lined up. We'll start with a pretty interesting one. Yep. The number 1 seed going into tomorrow, going into the last ranked team going into tomorrow, Tampa and Alabama. What a great way. These two teams.
Well,
Niagara, Alabama, my bad. Georgia, Alabama. Yes. And you got a firsthand experience watching those CHS playoffs, watching Tampa and Georgia. They're going to run it back now.
They are. Tampa played Georgia in the semifinals of the College Hockey South playoffs. And for those of you who have been following Tampa, they've been undefeated this year and pretty handily beating up on teams. And Georgia played them amazingly well throughout that game. It was a fun game to watch. Georgia had them up until the last minute and a half. And Tampa tied it up and then went into overtime, and Tampa scored within the first minute. But, Georgia, they're a sneaky team. They are a very sneaky team. They lost an awful lot of front-end talent. They don't have nearly the goal scoring that they did last year. Their defensive back end is tremendously good from the defense back to the goalie. And, they find their spots to score. They're very sneaky. John Camp's a absolutely great coach. Lance is a great coach on the Tampa side. So it's going to be a really good matchup. And that's going to be one of the more explosive games. All of our games tomorrow.
Yeah.
Last year.
We'll go down the list. Yeah.
Absolutely. Last year, the top 5 didn't come out of pool play.
Yeah.
It was amazing. This year, it's just the opposite.
Yeah, teams I was talking to Mark before we went live. Teams maybe learned their lesson from last year. Like, all right, we don't want to repeat that. Tampa definitely learned their lesson. The number 1 seed last year, Tampa was knocked out. Now they go back.
Georgia was knocked out last year.
Yes, Georgia was knocked out.
And
speaking of Georgia, they knocked out the number 1 team today in overtime, knocking out the Bonnies. But then the second matchup, I already mentioned one team, Alabama. They're taking on Niagara, and that's the only matchup that's out of conference.
That's right.
Every matchup tomorrow is going to be an in-conference battle, except for Alabama-Niagara.
And it's just it's a weird way that the rankings and then the pool play just fell out that way, right? You'd love to see more interconference play, but at the end of the day, the way that the pools were constructed based upon the rankings, the way that the performance played out, it is what it is. I would personally like to see more interconference
Yeah.
play, but we'll likely get that, in the semifinals. But the quarters tomorrow, it's going to be a show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our one out-of-conference matchup. Now back to an in-conference matchup. Upstate, Binghamton, strong showing in pool play. They wound up knocking off the defending champion Babson in a rematch from last year in the winner-go-home game. They won it in overtime 2-1. Binghamton gets U Buffalo. U Buffalo had an interesting scenario against FAU. They need to beat the Owls and win by 3 to move on. What do? They won 4-1. So it's U Buffalo and Binghamton tomorrow.
And Buffalo's got the same story. I mean, they were a very, very strong team for a number of years. And then up until this season, they had a couple of down years. And, they brought in some new talent. They brought in some new leadership. They absolutely turned it around. They had a very strong showing in the upper New York. I know they traveled to some other conferences to play some other teams, right, which helped their strength of schedule. But I think, in addition to strength of schedule, it allowed them to see talent outside of their own conference, which is really, really important. And that benefited them here, right? They beat a very strong FAU team. And FAU travels a lot to play different teams to get that experience. So, good for Buffalo. And I'm sure they'll use that collective experience as a positive going into tomorrow's game.
And now one of the last matchups we found out about, Farmingdale State avenges their last year pool play defeat to the Bonnies as they knock off Delaware just moments ago, 3-1 in another winner-go-home game and another conference matchup. Tomorrow o'clock, 11 a.m., it'll be Farmingdale and longtime rival Fairfield as they draw against Quinnipiac, but enough to push them into tomorrow.
It's just, it's great to see the action on third day that results in win or go home. Right, we had a number of upsets last year on the win or go home, which resulted in, the top 5 not participating in the quarterfinals. I think, to your point, this year they learned from that, and the majority of the teams, other than the Bonnies, won. And now, the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, I think 14, 16, something like that.
This year, yeah.
Yeah, this year are in. Versus last year, which was very different. It was more of the middle of the pack, which participated in quarterfinals. Now, the other thing that'll be a little bit different is we'll have the last day of pool play for Division III tomorrow. So it's another full day of hockey where we've got the quarterfinals of Division II, the last day of pool play for Division III, and then Tuesday will be the semifinals for both divisions, and then Wednesday will be the finals for both.
Yes. You have in the American Division, St. John Fisher dominating yesterday against Salisbury. Farmingdale State picked up a win. The Mocs, Florida Southern upsetting yesterday Niagara's D3 team, as the Mocs and Farmingdale, I think, are meeting up on Rink 1. Yeah. And the rest of the American Division, Mark, right now, it's going on. So be sure to watch on Black Dog Hockey.
Yeah, and it's been great to have the American Division teams here watching the national teams division play. And I know a number of the American Division teams are second teams, from the same organizations, right? So, it's giving the players who are playing D3 this year an opportunity to watch, some really, really good hockey for Division II as a way of upgrading, their talent base for next year. And I'll also tell you that the announcement that we did for AAU, the influx of calls from recruits, now that we've said we're creating another version of varsity, we're likely going to do D1, that has benefited our teams 1,000% because they're getting a different type of player that is now inquiring about the ability to come to their school. So, at the end of the day, and we've talked about this in multiple conversations, we're just here to raise the awareness of hockey in the United States at the collegiate level, but also specifically for our teams. How do we help them raise the awareness? And before we made the broad announcement about AAU, we talked to a number of our coaches who could play their teams at Division I, and we said, what would that enable you to do? And they said, night and day, our ability to go out and recruit and get a level of talent who would normally try to go for an NCAA D3 school. Again, no scholarship. The 99% of the NCAA D3 players won't go anywhere else after playing, but the majority of those schools require them to go play juniors or post-grad at a prep school. Many of our schools don't. So it allows them to move forward as a student, as well as being an athlete, much sooner within their lives, and they're doing so in a way that allows them to focus on what schools they want, what type of a major, what type of a program, and it's a combination of getting the student as well as the athlete. And Lance is the director of admissions at Tampa, and he said it has absolutely allowed him to expand his applicant pool and recruiting just with the announcement of AAU.
Yeah, they have a great freshman class over there
Yes,
at Tampa. That's a big reason why they're playing tomorrow in the quarterfinals. But I'm not going to have the last word, Mark. Chairman, I'll let you get the final word here. Bye, Rock.
I can't say thank you enough. John LaRochester's out here walking around. John LaRochester, John Rink, Scott Solomon, Jay Peacock, Sarge Day, Jay Turcock, Randy Smallridge, the team here of interns that we have been absolutely phenomenal. They're the backbone of the organization. The play-by-play announcers, such as yourself, the podcast, it just gives everybody experience. Every time that we're doing the podcast, we're doing the interviews, the parents are lining up, they're watching their sons getting interviewed, they're taking pictures, they're watching them after the fact on Twitter, on YouTube, other facets of social media, and we're creating lifelong memories, and that's really the opportunity here that we're doing. So the more that we can do this, the additional level of sponsorship, I keep telling the kids that within the next 5 years, it's my goal to get a level of sponsorship where we don't have to charge them to play for AAU College Hockey and put on these types of showcases. So, my goal over the course of the next few years, while Scott, bringing him on as the executive director, will focus on the next level of what we have to do, right? Myself and my board, one of our principal responsibilities is now going out, what more can we do? What different alliances and partnerships and sponsorships can we bring in that'll benefit these great student athletes and give them an opportunity to recognize, or be recognized rather, on a much larger stage, but also help them with defray costs, right? Because all these students, for the most part, are paying out of pocket to play college hockey. There are many schools that will pay for the program. There are many schools that don't. So some of our students are paying $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 out of their own pocket to play for the love of the sport, while paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, just to go to school. So, that's the inequity that I want to try to solve for. And the other thing is we're starting up a scholarship fund. And again, for many of the students that are having difficulty, who are great student athletes, they're going to have an ability to apply for scholarships for the next few years. So, really broadening what is it we're trying to do under that banner of Players First.
So just the beginning here at the AAU National Championships. I want to thank AAU Chairman of the board, Mark Purowitz. Thanks for coming back onto the podcast. I appreciate it. And we got some more games to watch. The American Division still going on. Day 3 for the American Division tomorrow, and pool play is over for the National Division. It's the quarterfinals tomorrow. A lot to keep track of, a lot going on now and tomorrow, alongside the chairman, Mark Purowitz. My name is Jordan DeLuciano. Thanks for joining us. Go watch the rest of the games tonight, and we'll see you all tomorrow.